I never thought it would happen to me. You always hear about it, people getting cheated on, but I always thought my wife, Lauren, was different. I thought I knew her. We'd been together for 3 years, and for the most part, it had been a good relationship. I mean, we had our arguments like any couple, but nothing that ever made me doubt her loyalty or love. We were happy, or so I thought. She was beautiful, smart, and ambitious. I loved everything about her. Her smile, her laugh, the way she lit up a room. And I thought she felt the same about me. Lauren worked as a senior marketing manager for a big tech company, one of the kind where you see their ads everywhere. It was a job that required a lot of travel, so at first I was okay with it. She'd go on business trips every couple of weeks, sometimes out of state, sometimes even overseas. I knew it came with the territory, and I trusted her. She'd always been pretty open about her trips, who she was meeting, what her schedule looked like. She'd check in with me regularly, send me a quick text or call when she was free. But slowly, over time, something began to change. Little things at first, almost too small to notice. It started with her being more distant when she was home. She wasn't as affectionate as she used to be. She'd always give me a kiss when she came home from a trip, but now it was just a quick peck. She seemed tired, like she had a million things on her mind, and her attention was always elsewhere. I told myself it was just work stress, but deep down I could tell something wasn't right. Then there were the phone changes. I'd never been the jealous type, and I trusted Lauren, but recently I noticed she was more protective of her phone. It wasn't like her to hide things, but lately she'd been taking it with her to the bathroom, keeping it face down on the table when we were out, and even keeping it on her nightstand at night. I didn't think too much of it at first. Maybe she just didn't want me to see something work-related, but after a while, it started to feel like she was hiding something. And every time I'd ask her about it, she'd brush it off with some excuse about work stuff or personal matters. The final straw came when she started being vague about her trips. She'd come home from a conference or a meeting in some city, and when I'd ask her how it went, she'd say something like, "Busy. Nothing interesting." In the beginning, she'd always tell me about the people she met, what the meetings were like, or the new places she discovered. But now, her answers were short, almost dismissive. The excitement she once had for her job seemed to be gone. One day, she casually mentioned she had to go on another business trip to New York. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was just another trip, right? But as soon as she said it, something in my gut twisted. She didn't seem as eager to talk about it. Usually, she'd share her itinerary, who she was meeting, and what her goals were for the trip. This time, she just said, "It's just a quick thing, nothing major." I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a small meeting, but the more I thought about it, the more it didn't sit right with me. She was too vague. She didn't even mention where she was staying. I tried not to overthink it, but I couldn't help myself. I wanted to trust her, I really did, but there were just too many little things that added up. The late nights at the office, the way she'd check her phone in the middle of conversations, the lack of detail about her trips. Something felt off. I knew she'd always been a hard worker, but this felt different. She'd never been like this before. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but my mind couldn't stop racing. I decided to keep my eyes open. Maybe I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than she was letting on. Every time she left for a trip, I'd feel that knot in my stomach. And when she told me about New York, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was happening, and I wasn't sure what it was, but I had a bad feeling it wasn't just business. When Lauren told me about the New York trip, I didn't think much of it at first. I'd heard it all before. Another business trip for her, another few days in a city I wasn't all that concerned about. I knew the company she worked for, a massive marketing firm, was constantly sending her to different cities. New York wasn't anything special, but something about the way she said it this time, so casually, almost as if she didn't care about the details, set off an alarm in my head. I tried to ignore it, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. The night before she was set to leave, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when Lauren came out of the bedroom dressed in her usual travel attire, slacks and a blouse, but this time, she was wearing heels. Not the normal kind she wore to the office, but the kind that screamed, "Look at me." It wasn't the outfit itself, but the way she looked in it. There was something about the confidence in her step, the way she moved that felt different, like she was preparing for more than just a work trip. She had an air of excitement about her, something I hadn't seen in a while. "Are you all set for tomorrow?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, mostly. Just need to pack the last few things." She didn't look up from her phone, typing out a message or email as she walked past me. I didn't say anything more, but I felt my eyes narrowing. This wasn't the usual, "I'm about to leave for a trip" vibe. Normally, she would spend the night packing, making sure everything was in order, asking if I had any questions about the trip. She would even make small talk about her meetings, how busy she expected them to be, and when she'd be back. But this time, she seemed distant, distracted, almost like she couldn't wait to leave. Later, when she went into the bathroom to freshen up, I found myself walking past her suitcase. It wasn't anything intentional, but I had the urge to see what she was packing. I tried to convince myself it was just curiosity. I wasn't snooping. It was a simple check just to see if she had anything unusual, any clues that might explain the strange behavior I was starting to notice. At first glance, everything seemed normal. There were the usual clothes, blouses, pants, a few business skirts. But then, at the bottom of the suitcase, I spotted something that immediately caught my attention. It was a black dress, sleek, tight, the kind of dress she'd wear for a night out with me, or if we were going to a fancy dinner. But I didn't remember her mentioning any evening plans in New York. And I certainly didn't think she'd be wearing a dress like that to a business meeting. My heart sank as I picked it up. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was going to a work dinner. Maybe there was a formal event I didn't know about. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. That wasn't why she was packing a dress like that. I quickly shoved it back into the suitcase, trying not to make any noise, my pulse pounding in my ears. Was this a sign? Was this the kind of thing you'd pack if you were planning to meet someone special? Someone you didn't want your husband to know about? I stood there for a moment, staring at the suitcase, trying to process what I was feeling. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe I was overthinking this. But then, why hadn't she mentioned anything about evening events or dinner plans? Why did she feel the need to pack a dress like that without telling me about it? When she came out of the bathroom, I quickly changed the subject, pretending nothing was wrong. But I could tell she was still distracted. Her mind was somewhere else, and that was becoming more obvious the longer she prepared for her trip. Later that evening, we ate dinner together, but the conversation felt forced. I tried to bring up the trip, asking her about the schedule and what she'd be doing while she was away. But she was so vague, almost like she didn't want to give me any details. "It's just meetings," she said. "Nothing special." "Are you meeting anyone interesting?" I asked, trying to gauge her reaction. "Just clients," she replied quickly, avoiding eye contact. "I'll probably be too busy to do anything else." I didn't know what to say. The more I asked, the more distant she became. She wasn't acting like the same woman who used to tell me everything about her business trips. This wasn't the Lauren I knew. The more I pressed, the more she brushed me off. She got up and went into the kitchen to finish cleaning up. And when she returned to the living room, she had that familiar, almost forced smile on her face. "Don't worry," she said, as if trying to reassure me. "It's just work, okay? You don't have to worry about anything. I'll call when I can." "All right," I said, trying to sound normal, but I could feel the knot in my stomach tighten. "Have a safe flight." She kissed me on the cheek, but it was just a quick peck. No pasión. No words. It was like she was just going through the motions. Something was definitely wrong, and the more I thought about it, the more I knew my suspicions weren't just in my head. She grabbed her bag and walked out the door without another word. As I watched her leave, I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling in my chest. I tried to tell myself that I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew something was happening. I didn't know what, but I had a bad feeling about this trip. It wasn't just business. It couldn't be. I had to know what was really going on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Was I just overreacting? Or was I about to find out that the woman I thought I knew had been hiding something from me all along? I spent the next day trying to keep myself busy. Lauren had left early that morning, and I was trying to convince myself I was just being paranoid. It was a business trip. She'd be busy, and everything would be fine. But every time I picked up my phone, I kept thinking about the dress I'd seen in her suitcase. Every time I thought about it, my mind spiraled deeper into doubt. Why would she need a dress like that for a work trip? Why hadn't she told me anything about her plans, about the people she'd be seeing? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that something was wrong. I tried calling her a few times throughout the day just to check in, but she didn't answer. That wasn't unusual, though. She'd always been busy during work hours. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different this time. When she finally did text me later that afternoon, the message felt cold, almost dismissive. Busy with work. Don't worry about me. Talk soon. That was it. No mention of the meeting she was in, no mention of anything she was doing or who she was meeting. Normally, she'd tell me a little about her day, give me a sense of what was going on. But this time, it felt like she was shutting me out. I didn't like it. That evening, while I was at the gym, I ran into one of my old friends, Dave. We hadn't seen each other in months, but we hit it off right away, as if no time had passed. We started catching up about life, work, and everything in between. At some point, the conversation turned to our relationships. Dave had met Lauren a few times. She'd even come to a couple of our get-togethers, and he knew how much I cared about her. He asked how things were going between us. Honestly, I don't know, I replied, running a hand through my hair. Something feels off lately. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like she's not the same. She's been distant, and she's acting weird about this New York trip. Dave said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Well, I'm sure everything's fine. Maybe you're just overthinking it. You know how she is, always working, always busy. I'm sure it's nothing. I wanted to believe him, but something kept eating at me. I don't know. I just get the feeling she's hiding something. Dave raised an eyebrow. What makes you say that? I don't know, man. It's the little things. She's been really vague about the trip, doesn't want to talk much about it. And I found a dress in her suitcase, the kind of dress she'd wear for a night out, not a business meeting. Dave leaned in closer, lowering his voice. You know, I saw her earlier today. I froze. What do you mean, you saw her? She was with some guy, Dave said, almost in a whisper. I didn't think much of it at first, but I ran into her in the lobby of the hotel she's staying at in New York. She was with this guy, and it didn't look like they were just talking. They were kind of, well, you know, more than friendly. They were touching, laughing, getting pretty close. My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you sure it was her? Yeah, I'm sure, Dave said. I recognized her right away. And the guy, I don't know him, but he didn't look like someone from her work. They were too close. It wasn't just business. The world felt like it was closing in on me. I had to know what was going on. If this was true, it was everything I feared. Lauren was with someone else, but I had to see it with my own eyes. I had to know for sure. I couldn't just sit around and let this eat at me. I told Dave I needed to make a phone call, and I stepped outside to get some fresh air. My mind was racing. I didn't know what to do with this information. If Lauren was with another guy, if she was cheating on me, I had to confront her. I had to know everything. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was piling up. I pulled out my phone and looked up the hotel where she was staying in New York. It wasn't hard to find. She'd mentioned it once in passing, but I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I was trembling as I stared at the screen, considering my options. I could call her and ask about it. I could trust her and give her the benefit of the doubt. But no, I needed to see it for myself. I needed to know if what Dave had told me was true. I made up my mind. I was going to go to that hotel. I didn't care what time it was. I needed answers. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt like I was walking straight into a nightmare. What if Dave was right? What if Lauren was lying to me all along? I didn't know what to expect, but I couldn't sit back and wonder anymore. I had to see her with my own eyes. It was time to find out the truth. I don't know what I was expecting when I arrived at that hotel in New York, but it wasn't this. My heart was racing as I stood outside the entrance, staring up at the glass doors. The lobby was dimly lit, quiet, almost empty. I felt like an intruder, like I didn't belong there. But I couldn't turn back. I had to know. I stepped inside and walked up to the front desk. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked for the room number where Lauren was staying. The receptionist glanced at me for a moment, then pulled up her information. It didn't take long for her to hand me the key card to Lauren's room. "Thank you," I said, forcing a smile as I turned toward the elevator. My hand was shaking slightly as I pressed the button, the anticipation building in my chest. I didn't know what I was going to find when I got to that room. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I felt like I was walking into a nightmare. The elevator ride seemed to take forever. I barely registered the floor numbers lighting up as the car ascended. It felt like time was stretching, like every second was another moment I could back out of, but I couldn't. I had to face this. I had to see the truth. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out into the hallway and walked toward the room, the keycard in my hand. My palms were sweaty, and I could hear the pounding of my heart in my ears. I reached her door and hesitated, staring at the number. This was it. I took a deep breath and slid the keycard into the slot. The door clicked open. I didn't expect to see them like this, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Lauren was there in the middle of the room, tangled with a man I didn't know. My breath caught in my throat, my feet frozen in place. She was straddling him, her back arched, eyes closed in pleasure, completely unaware of my presence. The sight hit me like a punch to the gut. It was real. I wasn't imagining it. She was making love to him. It felt like my world was shattering right in front of me. She wasn't just cheating. She was enjoying it. She was lost in it. The man beneath her had his hands on her hips, guiding her movements as if they'd been doing this for ages, as if it was nothing new. I stood there, frozen, unable to tear my eyes away from the scene before me. My mind was screaming, but my body refused to move. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. Then, the sound of the door creaking made Lauren pause. Her eyes snapped open, and she instantly froze when she saw me standing there in the doorway. I could see the panic in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I thought she might try to deny it, pretend like I hadn't seen what I was seeing. But there was no hiding now, no running. She quickly pulled away from the man, scrambling to cover herself with a sheet, her face flushed with embarrassment. But it wasn't enough. I'd already seen everything. I had seen the truth. "What the hell is going on, Lauren?" I finally found my voice, but it was raw, shaky, full of hurt and anger. She looked up at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to form words, but nothing came out. The man in the bed didn't say a word. He just sat up, unfazed, as if this was some casual thing for him. "Who is he?" I demanded, stepping into the room, feeling my blood boil. She looked at him, then back at me, her lips trembling. "Adam," she whispered, like it was supposed to explain everything. He's someone I've been working with." I wanted to scream, but I held it back. "Working with," I repeated, trying to wrap my head around the lies she was feeding me. "You're in his bed, Lauren. You're naked with him. And this is work? Is that how you want me to believe this?" She opened her mouth, but again, no words came out. The guilt on her face was unmistakable. She knew what I had seen. She knew she was caught, and yet, she couldn't even bring herself to apologize. "I've seen you with him before," I said, my voice growing more intense. "I saw how you were with him earlier today. The way you looked at him. Don't lie to me, Lauren. I'm not stupid." Her face twisted in frustration, her eyes darting to Adam for support. But he didn't even try to help her. He just watched the scene unfold like it wasn't his problem. "Please," she said finally, her voice breaking. "It's not what you think." "I was just what?" I shouted, taking a step toward her. "You were just working, right? How many times have you been with him? How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer. Instead, she dropped her head, unable to look me in the eyes. I felt the rage building up inside me, boiling over. How many lies had she told me? How many times had she made excuses, telling me everything was fine, when all along she had been fucking another man? I turned to that man. "Get out," I said flatly. "Now." He didn't hesitate. He stood up, dressed quickly, and without a word, he left the room, leaving Lauren standing there, her face a mixture of panic and defiance. "Lauren," I said, my voice steady but cold. I'm done. I'm done with this. With you." Her face crumpled, her eyes wide with disbelief. "No, no, please," she begged, stepping toward me, her voice desperate. "Don't leave me. We can fix this. Just give me a chance." But I wasn't listening. I wasn't interested in her empty promises anymore. I saw everything. I said, my voice final. "You've been lying to me for who knows how long, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen." I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "Please," she cried. "Please don't do this." I yanked my arm out of her grasp and walked out of the room, not looking back. I had seen enough. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't need her explanations. She was no longer the woman I thought I knew. She was just someone who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And that was something I couldn't forgive. I didn't expect it to be this easy, but once I walked out of that hotel room, I knew that was the end of Lauren and me. The hardest part, the part one thought I'd struggle with, was already behind me. I'd seen her for what she really was. Nothing more than a liar, a cheater, a woman who didn't care about the vows she'd taken. She had betrayed me, and now it was my turn to take control of the situation. I didn't go back to the hotel to grab my things right away. I didn't want to deal with her anymore. I didn't want her apology or her pathetic begging. I didn't want to hear how she didn't mean for it to happen, because I knew that was all bullshit. It had meant something to her. Hell, it probably meant a lot more than I'd ever meant to her. The next day, I texted her, flat and to the point. "I'm filing for divorce. Don't try to contact me. It's over." That was it. No explanation, no back and forth. I didn't want to be dragged into her endless cycle of lies and deceit. She could beg all she wanted, but I was done. The woman who had stood in front of me for 3 years, the one I thought I knew, wasn't the woman I married anymore. She was someone else, someone I didn't even recognize. But I knew that wouldn't be the end of it. No way would Lauren let me walk away that easily. She had never been the type to give up without a fight. And just like that, she started texting me again, and not in the way I expected. Her texts weren't full of apologies or attempts to salvage our relationship. No, instead, she was angry. She was furious. "How could you do this to me?" she wrote. "I was just trying to have a little fun. You never gave me enough attention. You never cared about me like he does." I read the message once, twice, trying to make sense of it. The arrogance in her words, the complete lack of remorse. It only pissed me off more. "Really?" I texted back. "You expect me to feel bad for you? You've been screwing around behind my back for how long, Lauren? You think I'm just going to forget everything?" Her next message was a series of angry rants, but one stuck out to me. "You're nothing without me. You wouldn't have even known how to be a man without me." I couldn't believe it. After everything she'd done, after everything I'd witnessed, she still had the audacity to act like I owed her something. That was when I knew what I had to do. I had to hit her where it would hurt. The next week, I made sure to let her know exactly what her little affair had cost her. I went to her work. She worked as a senior project manager for a marketing firm, and after our wedding, I had made a lot of connections for her. Connections that helped her climb the corporate ladder. I had even gotten her a spot in some exclusive networking events, all while supporting her career. But now, I was going to use all of that against her. I contacted a few people at the firm who owed me favors. Nothing too extreme, but just enough to get her fired. I knew it was cold, but at that point I didn't care. I wasn't about to let her get away with destroying everything we had built together. A few days later, Lauren called me in a panic, her voice shaking with fear. "I don't know what's happening," she said, "but they're letting me go. I've been called into a meeting with HR today, and they're saying they have evidence against me. They're firing me, Mark." I could feel a twisted satisfaction in my gut. Good. Let her feel the weight of the consequences. I didn't let her guilt trip me. Didn't let her play the victim anymore. "You brought this on yourself, Lauren. I warned you what would happen if you kept this up. This is what you get." Her reaction? To start crying. To call me a monster and scream at me through the phone. She begged, she pleaded, she tried everything. But the more she begged, the stronger my resolve became. I also made sure that she knew I wasn't going to let her off the hook financially. While she was sorting out the mess at work, I made arrangements for our divorce to be final and fast. I didn't waste any time dragging things out. I had everything set up already, ready to hit her with the news that she wasn't getting much in the settlement. The house, the savings, it was all going to be mine. Her response when she finally got the divorce papers? She sent me a long message full of incoherent rants about how I was the one who ruined everything, how she never loved me anyway, and how I was the loser for giving up on us. I couldn't help but laugh as I read it. There was no ounce of self-awareness in her. But the best part was when I showed up at her place to grab the last of my things. She was there, throwing a fit as usual, shouting and demanding I take her back. But when I handed her the signed papers and told her to get the hell out of my life, she just broke down. The woman who had thought she could manipulate me into taking her back was nothing more than a broken shell, crying on the floor, begging for forgiveness. I didn't stay for the drama. I didn't need to hear her excuses or her fake remorse anymore. I walked out of that house, slammed the door behind me, and didn't look back. I took everything I could from her, and I made sure she knew what it felt like to lose it all. But it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about getting my life back, about moving on from the woman who had once meant everything to me, but had thrown it all away for some cheap thrill. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel relieved. I was free. Free from her lies, her manipulation, and most of all, free from the woman who had destroyed the trust one had once put everything into.